Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and today I'm going to focus on one of my favorite bands as a kid, Squeeze. Not just any Squeeze. I'm going to be focusing on classic Squeeze. That means different things to different people. I'm taking you from Squeeze's first single in '77 all the way up through Difford and Tilbrook's solo album in 1984. That's my Squeeze. I don't know what your Squeeze is, but you're welcome to it. If you came for late era Squeeze, sorry I can't help you. For the rest of you, are you ready? Squeeze formed in a place called Deptford. Squeeze formed in Deptford, London in 1974. The first recorded lineup of Squeeze is Glenn Tilbrook on lead guitar and vocals, Chris Difford on guitar and vocals. Glenn and Chris are the songwriters, with Chris writing the lyrics and Glenn writing the music. Jools Holland on piano, Harry Kakuli on bass, and Gilson Lavis on drums. In July of 1977, the band released Packet of Three, a 3-song 7-inch produced by John Cale. Of the 3 in this packet, the most special song is Cat on a Wall, which you might call power pop with a punk edge. What's most amazing about this early effort is that Difford and Tilbrook are already using their great performance trick of intertwining the vocals and singing the chorus together in octave apart. Cat on a Wall is a great, all caps, great Squeeze song. If you've never heard it and you call yourself a Squeeze fan, you need to follow the link I'll be putting below. In March of 1978, UK Squeeze released Squeeze, or UK Squeeze. There were reportedly a couple of North American bands, one in Canada and one in America, that used the name Squeeze. They say you can't judge a book by its cover, but this album is a different story. What you see is what you get. Producer John Cale from the Velvet Underground did not care much for Squeeze's material at the time. That same material, it must be noted, that not only made them a successful live act, but that got them a record deal in the first place. So John told the band to throw out everything they already had and write brand new material for this album using a few central themes: muscle men, sex, and more muscle men. With that in mind, it's no surprise that the 2 best tracks on this album are the ones produced by the band themselves. But more on that later. Incidentally, Squeeze, as you can see, have never had an album cover worthy of the music it houses. From the first album on, they've had terrible covers. They're not sexy covers, they're not cool covers, and I really think their lousy covers have hurt their legacy during this vinyl resurgence. When lead track Sex Master kicks in, its music sounds almost exactly like the keyboard-driven live version of Raw Power off Iggy and the Stooges' Metallic KO. Ironic when you remember that John Cale also produced the Stooges' debut album. As for the lyrics, they definitely give people the wrong idea of who Squeeze are as a band. Bang Bang is another quick hit blast of hopped up Squeeze that's all about, well, sex. The band produced the track themselves, one of 2 on this album produced without Cale's interference. The band must have been happy with the results because not only was this the second single released from the album, but Squeeze has been including Bang Bang in their live set list a lot over the past 10 years. Strong in Reason sees Chris Difford take over on lead vocals on a laid-back yet shimmering track where you can really hear just how good Gilson Lavis is as a drummer. This song is not all that dissimilar from things you'd hear on later Squeeze albums, so in that regard it's a victory for the band. The next song has not only one of the worst song titles Squeeze would ever have, but one of the worst song titles any song would ever have. Wild Sewerage Tickles Brazil. It's thankfully an instrumental. I don't want to think about what lyrics they would come up with for that. And it's a pretty spacey, funky instrumental at that. Out of Control has a really slow burn intro, but soon evolves into a real jaunty workout for the band. Again, Gilson's drumming is the real star here. I think Cale must have understood Gilson's importance, because his drums are mic'd perfectly throughout the album, and this track is a wonderful showcase for him. Take Me I'm Yours is the next song on this album, and it's Squeeze's first classic song. Chris and Glenn this time not only sing the chorus together, but sing every single line of this song together. Again, an octave apart, that wonderful trademark Squeeze sound. Take Me I'm Yours is the second of 2 songs produced only by the band. The first single released from this album, Take Me I'm Yours, shot up to number 19 on the UK charts. If the single was the only thing you heard by the band at the time, It would give you the right idea about who Squeeze really was, but the wrong idea about what the bulk of this album sounds like. The Model is a catchy, upbeat tune that just might be my second favorite tune on this album after Take Me I'm Yours. First Thing Wrong is a Sex Gone Sideways story with music that sounds like a barrel house piano version of Rod Stewart's Hot Legs. Remember What is another light speed rocker about someone who wakes up and can't remember anything about what or who he did last night. Hesitation is sung by Chris Difford, and it's a methodical, abrasive track with repetitive lyrics until you get to the very cool chorus. Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Final track, Get Smart, is probably the only way this album could end. Its lyrics are more disposable repetitions written on demand, and the music is another 90 miles per hour rave up. This time though, I shit you not, the music sounds very much like the opening of Devo's Uncontrollable Urge. Yeah, I know, link below. UK Squeeze's debut album is very much maligned, but being that it was their first time in a proper studio, with a real high-profile producer who's imposing his own ideas on the band and suppressing who they actually were, it's amazing in retrospect that a few tunes actually shine through and show you who Squeeze actually were. So in that regard, I think it's a decent debut for the band. In April of 1979, the band released Cool for Cats. Gone is John Cale, in is producer John Wood. John would produce this album with the band, and I believe they hit it off famously. John Wood actually engineered all three of Nick Drake's albums, and he was one of the few people that Nick Drake really trusted. Now, if someone as fragile and beautiful as Nick Drake, like John Wood must be a sweetheart of a guy, so I'm sure that this went well. Incidentally, this is the coolest, no pun intended, Squeeze album cover. This is as good as it gets. If you think they have a better album cover, please let me know in the comments. There's something off about this album sleeve though, and that's that John Bentley, who would replace Harry Kakuli on bass, is already on the back cover and credited up at the top as being the bass player for Squeeze. The only problem with that is Harry Kakuli actually played bass on this entire album. The American release, by the way, which comes in this lovely off-putting purple, does show Harry on the back of the album with the boys. All I can think is that the band was sore at Harry for leaving and rushed to get John Bentley on the cover, but the American distributor never got the news, and so Harry is correctly credited as the bass player on this album. In any case, this is a large step forward for the band, and this is the Squeeze that you know and love. Right from the opening track, Slap and Tickle, the boys sound more self-assured and authoritative than they did on their debut LP. Glenn and Chris sing every lyric together, except for the bridge where Chris drops out, giving the song more dynamics. And it's that offbeat, octave-apart harmony that stamps the song with the Squeeze trademark. Review is a wonderfully downbeat tune about a washed-up stage performer who's hitting the bottle because his best days are behind him. Touching Me, Touching You is a bouncy song that somehow makes masturbation seem as innocent as puppy love. It's Not Cricket is one of my favorite songs on this album. It starts out as an ode to a stripper, but it soon turns out his character is just teasing us with a series of juicy gossip stories, stopping just short of giving what he decrees to be any incriminating details, such as names, not unlike the album's title track, with its Cockney storytelling hour appeal. It's Not Cricket is charming as hell, and Chris puts the song over well. Glenn Tilbrook's voice is so pretty, he puts over a song like It's So Dirty, with power pop precociousness. Chris Difford takes over on The Knack, as usual with darkly themed songs. And it's another oddball travelogue, whose lyrics have cinematic flair. Harry's inventive bass playing here is really top-notch, as is the twisted and distorted keyboard work from Jools Holland. Up the Junction is sung by Glenn alone. Difford and Tilbrook have an unerring sense of which one of them should sing lead, when they should sing together, or when they should alternate. It's one of the main reasons their songs are so unique, and it's probably why you don't see an awful lot of Squeeze cover versions. Up the Junction is perhaps Chris Difford's finest moment as a lyricist, as he chronicles a couple's romance, their having a child, and their breakup, all within a snappy 3-minute pop song. And he does it all without the benefit of a chorus. The song's title, by the way, is only used at the very end of the song, a trick Chris said he learned from Virginia Plain by Roxy Music. Hard to Find features Chris's harsh vocals on the verses and Glenn's pretty vocals on the chorus. Jools Holland's clever keyboard vamping lightens the hard-driven track just enough to make it bounce. I'm going to go ahead and call Slightly Drunk the hidden gem on this album. It's my Hollis Heatseeker, patent pending. Glenn's virtuoso guitar runs and Gilson's precision drumming really steal the spotlight. And there's a vocoder effect on the middle eight vocals. That's really a nice little production touch. It's some of the best music on this album. Goodbye Girl is built around a wonderful circular synth pattern, and the song is another Squeeze classic. Its chorus boasts the brilliant lyrics, "Sunlight on the lino, short for linoleum, woke me with a shake. I looked around to find her, but she had gone. Goodbye Girl." Come on, do you know how hard it is to write lyrics that simple? Title track Cool for Cats was the band's first big hit. Cool for Cats is such a fun song, I don't even know really how to describe it. It's a hodgepodge of American Western imagery, cowboys and Indians, but having that subject matter delivered to you by someone who sounds like he's a character on Monty Python's Flying Circus is beyond weird and wonderful. Jools Holland's fantastic piano outro, along with the delicious female backing vocals, really send the song out with style. I have a real soft spot in my heart for this album. With the band free from an overbearing producer, they produce some of their best work. They come through with an exciting experimental album that's an awful lot of fun. In February of 1980, the band released Argy Bargy, or Argy Bargy, depending where you're from. I believe Cockney slang for an argument, an argument. This album does see the arrival of John Bentley for reals on the album. He replaced Harry Kakuli. Harry Kakuli was the first member of the band to go solo. You know, before Squeeze formed, Harry had already been in a band with Peter Perrett from The Only Ones called The England's Glory, which finally saw their stuff released after Peter's band, The Only Ones, became successful. Anyway, Harry left to do dance music, disco. Hush your mouth. I'm just talking about disco. In any case, his replacement, John Bentley, is a very strong bass player who drives the band on the next few albums. Without question, Argy Bargy is Squeeze's best album, and its lead-off track, Pulling Muscles from the Shell, is quite possibly their best song. The lyrics are some of Chris's most inventive, equal parts British picture postcard and blurry snapshots taken at the beach. The music for this seaside song is as driven and harsh as any they'd ever recorded, with each player getting to shine. The band trades off in almost jazz solo style, a driving bass, an incessant piano dirge, rock-solid drumming, and occasional guitar flourishes, and it all adds up into a brilliant song. Another Nail in My Heart is next, and it's another classic on an album of classics. On this one, Glenn shows what a great guitarist he is about a minute in, with an outlandishly melodic guitar solo that's equal parts flashy and subdued. And that's a reason why I think Glenn doesn't get rated as highly as a guitarist as he should. His solos always serve the song and not himself. Separate Beds was my favorite Squeeze song as a kid because I could really relate to the lyrics of meeting your girlfriend's parents and having them not like you. My favorite lyrical couplet that speaks to that theme is still, "Her mother didn't like me, she thought I was on drugs. My mother didn't like her, she'd never peel the spuds." I see it as a sort of sister song to Up the Junction, being the juvenile equivalent, or part one if you like, to that song's chronicling of a relationship. Misadventure, much like Slightly Drunk before it, is one of those manic speed-throughs at which Squeeze excels, somehow speeding through the song without losing the listener, which I attribute to Glenn's effortless vocals, where he's sure to get every word across. Gilson's drumming and Jools' keyboard work really distinguish themselves here, and during the breakdown where the whole band gets in the pocket, each member again gets to shine momentarily, before Glenn brings the whole song home with a real guitar blast. These guys could play. I Think I'm Go-Go is a nice change of pace, but whereas I'd call this a ballad for other bands, Squeeze always puts such sinister music under ballads that they seem more like mood pieces, tone poems, if you will. Ross Geller. Glenn's sweet vocals keep things innocent until the music turns more sinister, and then Chris takes over on vocals, for which he's well suited. It's a winning combination. The band would often begin concerts with it, and it's easy to hear why. It's some of their best music. Glenn and Chris sing it together, and Jools Holland's Twilight Zone-ish keyboards lend it an otherworldly quality. It's a fun song musically, almost sounding at times as if the record is skipping, as the band repeats with repetitious precision. If I, how cool is that? I'm going to put a link below to Chris Difford doing it live in a pub, so you can hear just how cool this song is, even when stripped down. Farfisa Beat is built around a really sweet Glenn guitar run, but it puts Jools Holland front and center, punctuating the choruses, and it allows Mr. Holland to vamp during the bridge. Farfisa Beat has one of the best outros ever. This is a fitting tribute to that most fun sounding of organs, but it's far from the only rock song to praise an organ, if you know what I'm talking about. Here Comes That Feeling sees Chris take over on vocals with some deliciously idiosyncratic lyrics such as "Egg on the shirt of my heart, a little club soda will get that out." Vicky Verky delivers a little more British humor with its intentional mispronunciation of vice versa. This is my pick for Glenn's best vocal on the album. No small feat, as this album houses more classic Squeeze songs than any other. Jools also has his tastiest solo on the album, again playing exactly what this song calls for. Wrong Side of the Moon is the only song on this album co-written by Jools Holland and Chris Difford, with Jools taking over on a rare lead vocal performance, and I love his voice here. The song begins with a Motown-like piano figure before Jools' vocals come in on one of the band's moodiest songs on this album. I love Wrong Side of the Moon, and it's my deep cut on this album. Glenn's guitar work on this track is stellar throughout, and even whips out a nasty guitar solo that takes the track up a notch. But as always, he stays within the song's tone. Newly married at the time, Chris's heartfelt lyrics are about someone who misses his love because they are across the ocean, aka The Wrong Side of the Moon. Such a good song. There at the Top is a perfect album closer about a modern businesswoman who's there at the top, but the top may not be all it seems. It brings the curtain down on Squeeze's masterpiece. I suspect if the album had a better title, or at least a more American-friendly one, and better artwork, it would have been even bigger, and have a much stronger legacy today. As is, people sleep on this album, which is every bit the equal of a brilliant album such as Elvis Costello's This Year's Model, which does have a superior title and artwork. This is Squeeze's best album, but some people say it's the next album. May of 1981, the band release East Side Story. I just mentioned Elvis Costello. Elvis is actually one of the producers of this album, along with the engineer. Chris Difford said that it was wonderful having Elvis as a producer because he felt the competition was good for him, because Elvis could always come up with a better lyric, so it kept him on his game. Now, I must admit, some people call East Side Story the band's masterpiece, but I don't see how it tops Argy Bargy for either number of Squeeze classics or sheer listenability from front to back. However, it's close. This sees another personnel change. Jools Holland left the band to go solo, and later to become a TV personality and bon vivant. Jools is replaced here by Paul Carrack. Paul was in the band Ace, who had that wonderful song, How Long Has This Been Going On? He was later with Mike and the Mechanics, but he joined Squeeze for this one album at the perfect time, and you'll see why later. I love opening track In Quintessence. It's got a nice R&B flavor, which no doubt comes from Dave Edmunds, who produced this one song on the album. And Glenn plays another great guitar solo in Dave Edmunds' style. It features some fantastic Chris lyrics, including this winning sequence. In the corner with his book and tissue, all he can do is pretend to miss you. Closes his eyes as he sees her body. Pulls funny faces, and that's his hobby. I can't think of a band that handles the subject of masturbation with as much class as Squeeze does. This is one of my favorite tracks on the album. Chris Difford takes lead vocals on Someone Else's Heart, a real slow burn ballad that's driven by chest-thumping bass. Glenn is on backing vocals along with newest band member Paul Carrack, and the result is gorgeous. It was Elvis Costello who suggested that Paul Carrack take lead vocals on the next track, the all-time Squeeze classic, Tempted. It's nice timing that Paul Carrack should join the band just in time to sing this song that is absolutely perfect for his voice. By the way, I could do an entire episode on Paul Carrack's voice. There are cults in England built around the worship of Paul Carrack's voice. Lyrics for the second verse of the song are provided by Glenn and producer Elvis Costello. You can hear Elvis best on the line, "The people keep on grinding." The people keep on grinding. Written by Chris Difford in the back of a taxi on his way to Heathrow Airport when the band were leaving on tour. The lyrics describe everything Chris saw that morning, as well as the good times that he anticipated he'd have on that tour. This song is a top 5 Squeeze song, and probably the Squeeze song most non-Squeeze fans know. It's hard at this point to envision a time when the song Tempted didn't exist. In any case, it's the standout from the album, and the main reason why some people call this Squeeze's masterpiece. It's also the reason I do not, because if you remove Tempted from this masterpiece, the album falls apart. Piccadilly is another speedy tune, not unlike Slightly Drunk or Vicky Verky off the previous album. It's sort of a kitchen sink narrative, with quick flashes of visceral and sexy imagery over a relentless and super fun melody. There's No Tomorrow is a breathy, Beatlesque tune that's as creepy as it is unique. Heaven is a bit of a twisted track, but with irresistible bass work. Bass player John Bentley is credited as a co-writer on this track with Difford and Tilbrook, and you can hear why. It's hard to ignore John's sexy as hell funk bass lines throughout this oddball tune. Woman's World is a sweet, laid-back number that hears Glenn rail against a woman's lot in life, with lyrics that juxtapose the regal rule of a kingdom with a wife's daily slave to the grind. When the final chorus finally kicks in, it sounds very Elvis Costello-like, in a good way. Is That Love is somewhat akin to If I Didn't Love You, in that it's the sweetest sounding song about a couple fighting I've ever heard. The couple fight, one of them leaves. When cooler heads prevail, they find themselves still together. That's as much about Difford and Tilbrook as it is about this subject's couple. Now that is love. At only 2.5 minutes, the song is almost over before it begins. But it's far from the only Squeeze song that leaves us wanting more. Glenn absolutely murders an understated guitar solo that just reinforces how underrated he is as a musician. Don't let the name of the song F-Hole fool you. This is an almost orchestral song, and one of the most ambitious compositions Squeeze has ever attempted. I won't call it a rousing success, but it's definitely an interesting listen. Labeled with Love is an attempt at a Southern American love song, and it is the exact reason you get Elvis Costello as a producer. His production on this song is pitch perfect and ensures the track is dripping with old-timey authenticity. The music on Someone Else's Bell sounds very much like the music you'll hear on future Squeeze albums. Much glossier and slicker, but it's a little out of place here. The lyrics, on the other hand, though, are classic Squeeze, and finds the song's subject ringing someone else's bell. Mumbo Jumbo is a song I slept on for the first 100 or so times I played this album, but it's got some of the band's most driven keyboard work since Farfisa Beat, Good on You, Paul, and it's got some of Chris's most carefree lyrics. Vanity Fair features a classy string quartet, providing music worthy of the song's title. Album closer Messed Around is another track where Elvis's love of American R&B comes in handy, as the song has a deliciously down-home, hollow-body guitar flavor. It actually sounds much like the best of the Stray Cats. Paul Carrack gets to shine on a little piano flourish before Glenn takes over with a little Eddie Cochran guitar run. Messed Around is my deep cut on this album. Something happened during the publicity push for album East Side Story. A Rolling Stone article had the following quote: "British New Wave has finally found its own John Lennon and Paul McCartney." First of all, I disagree. In my opinion, the big influence I hear with Squeeze is the best work of Ray Davies with the Kinks. Catchy tunes chronicling the idiosyncrasies of day-to-day life with an unapologetically British bent. But unfortunately, the Lennon-McCartney comparison was, of course, quoted in every single advertising blurb for the band. And it led to no good. Has any good ever come from Rolling Stone magazine? The songwriters themselves, Difford and Tilbrook, would vacillate between feeling totally full of themselves and completely unworthy of the comparison. And it's not a stretch, given the following album, to say that it put a real wrench in their songwriting. In May of 1982, the band released Sweets from a Stranger. Paul Carrack is gone. He is replaced on keyboards by Don Snow. This is a darker album for the band. If Squeeze were the Cure, this would be their pornography album. From the opening track, Out of Touch, you can hear a much more processed 80s sound than you're used to from Squeeze. And much like the electronic instruments, Out of Touch leaves me cold. Thematically, there's an awful lot of alcohol on this album, in almost every track. Second track, I Can't Hold On, is on its surface that same Squeeze you love. But whereas the verses are friendly and familiar, the chorus is fairly uninspired and even lazy. Points of View, on the other hand, is a breath of fresh air. It's a quiet and understated ballad with plenty of depth. It's your first hint, also, that Squeeze would be transitioning into a much more easygoing musical direction. Stranger Than the Stranger on the Shore doesn't just have a fun title, but some of the most fun music they've made in a long time. It's a rare moment of adventurousness for this much more mature Squeeze, and I think its musical experimentation would have fit in nicely on Cool for Cats. With a keyboard sound almost as over the top as the one on Slap and Tickle, the juxtaposition of Gilson's relentless drumming on the choruses, giving way to psychedelic keyboard flourishes, has a real dizzying effect, and this is one of my favorite tracks on the album. As with any song with the title Onto the Dance Floor, the band placed the bass front and center for a kind of drunken melody that might keep you a little too off balance to dance. When the Hangover Strikes is probably my least favorite song on the album, and it's so slow and humorless that it kind of puts me to sleep. The band quickly rebounds with Black Coffee in Bed, another all-time classic from the band. It's a song about love and loss, very reminiscent of the soulful Tempted in both inspiration and composition. With its Motown quality backing vocals and expert musicianship, Black Coffee in Bed is a rare moment on the album where the band lives up to the heights of their previous albums. I've Returned is a very strong vocal performance from Glenn. However, I see the lyrics as fairly uninspired, as evidenced in moments such as, I thought our love had died forever, but it just went to sleep. Tongue Like a Knife is another song that leaves me cold, without any hook or lyric to really rope me in. His House, Her Home pairs a great breathy vocal from Chris with some harpsichord-like keyboard playing from New Edition Don Snow. The very first dance sees Glenn and Chris trade off vocals on a song which unfortunately doesn't seem to be able to make up its mind about what kind of song it wants to be. Closing track, The Elephant Song, is one of my favorite songs on this album. Glenn's crisp vocal sails over a finely textured song with plenty of nuanced backing vocals that help leave the album on a high note. Aside from the success of Black Coffee in Bed, Sweets from a Stranger didn't do very well compared to previous Squeeze albums. So A&M Records asked the band for a single. They responded with Annie Get Your Gun, which is a fun song with a strong vocal performance, but fairly nonsensical lyrics, a jumble of different ideas. Fun fact, the band doesn't play on this track. The producer brought in studio musicians who came in and laid down the backing track before Chris and Glenn came in to do their vocals. Glenn equated the experience to being in the Monkees. And like the Monkees' best work, this song rocks. Annie was the only new song released on Squeeze's October 1982 compilation, Singles 45s and Under, as Annie Get Your Gun was released as a single prior to this album. Not many bands can provide a best of just 5 albums into their career, but this singles compilation of heavy hitters will make a Squeeze convert out of anyone. And this is the one Squeeze LP everybody should have. By the way, you want to get the US version, which has If I Didn't Love You, as opposed to the UK version, which has Labeled with Love instead. This singles collection put a nice punctuation on the career of early Squeeze, as Difford and Tilbrook broke up the band after the Sweets from a Stranger album. In July of 1984, Difford and Tilbrook release Difford and Tilbrook. This album is produced by the man, the myth, the legend, Tony Visconti. Yes, that Tony Visconti of T-Rex and David Bowie fame. Folks, this is a good example of why you should never get rid of albums, even if they don't speak to you at the time. Talk about a grower. When Actions Speak Faster kicks in, you'll be taken aback by the electronic feel of the music. Whereas Squeeze once sounded organic and warm, here you can hear the studio on the album. Love's Crashing Waves is one of my favorite songs on this album. It's easy listening, and it's something you might hear in a dentist's office. And I don't mean that in a bad way. When I got to the third song, Picking Up the Pieces, I understood why this album was so maligned. They were smart enough to segue out of the genre they were aging out of, new wave, in which they never quite fit, to be honest, and instead are headed directly to middle of the road, where they'd fit in nicely alongside Level 42, or Crowded House, or the Blow Monkeys. They don't even use the same recording style as on Squeeze albums. For example, Chris doesn't double Glenn's vocals on this album, and he never takes lead himself. Glenn is the lead vocalist throughout. Details like that reinforce that people's problem with this album is mostly one of perception. I really love the song On My Mind Tonight. It's some seriously sexy ear candy that creates the perfect mood to get you into this album. The track Man for All Seasons is perhaps the most Squeeze-like of all the songs on this album. It's got that warmer sound missing from the earlier tracks, and has a rather bouncy delivery old Squeeze fans will enjoy. Side 2, track 1, The Power Slot, rightfully goes to Hope Fell Down, which I think is the best song on this album. The lyrics show that Chris is on top of his game as ever. I had such hopes, I had such visions planned. The frames were shot, but now our future's canned. It's more of those classic downbeat lyrical gymnastics you've always loved about Chris's writing. Wagon Train is exactly what it sounds like, an ode to the Wild West's gold fever-inspired caravan that's almost like a mature look back on the subject matter of Cool for Cats. The production on Wagon Train is spot on, and it ironically almost sounds like a train chugging along. You Cannot Hurt the Girl pays tribute to a girl who's been let down so many times she's inured to pain. I love the line, "You can't hurt the girl and not cry." I love that little switcheroo. Tears for Attention is another easy on the ears slice of adult-oriented rock that you can enjoy on your yacht or while firing up the hibachi on your terrace. This is lighthearted music for those moments of leisure, however fleeting. Now the lyrics, on the other hand, with its kisses of corruption and tears for attention, sees a couple go through a night of hell only to come out stronger on the other end. Album closer The Apple Tree sounds almost Beatlesque to me, with its darkly ethereal and backtracked music, coupled with a deliberate and unpredictable vocal from Glenn. Hell of a closer. This is the end of the period that I would call classic Squeeze. I say that because as great as the band around them were, and they all contributed greatly, Squeeze is essentially Difford and Tilbrook and anyone they choose to play with. After their solo album, Difford and Tilbrook, Glenn and Chris reformed Squeeze in 1985. I had the pleasure of seeing them on that tour, on what they called their first time out, second time around tour. Every album, from Così fan tutti frutti on, continues the adult pop contemporary direction that the songs on Difford and Tilbrook originated, which has made them beloved by the VH1 set. Don't get me wrong, Squeeze is a great band, and so they had moments on other albums, especially the album Babylon and On, which produced the US hits Hourglass and 8535937. And my personal favorite on that LP, Trust Me to Open My Mouth. But their newer songs sounded more formulaic and more synthetic, without any of the barroom grit of their earlier work. I'll leave it to someone else to chronicle that later era Squeeze, but I hope you enjoyed this deep dive on my favorite era of Squeeze. That is it for this week on Pop Culture Graveyard. If you enjoyed this video and you would like to support the channel, please visit my Patreon, patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring that little bell, and I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.